Hey, welcome back to Biktrix Live. It's another beautiful Friday afternoon here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I'm coming to you from our Saskatoon showroom. We popped in here to film this week because our ops and mechanics are busy moving house, so we just needed somewhere new and exciting to film. So today's topic is changing a bike tire, and this is one that's pretty key for any bike owner. So to help me out today, I have from our tech support team my good buddy Tyler.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today, Tyler. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, tell the folks what you do with the company, how long you've been here.
I'm Tyler. I've been with Biktrix for about a year now. I help our tech support team help them find answers for their questions. I write a bunch of articles on our support site. I shoot a bunch of videos for our support site. And occasionally I'm giving people a call to help them out with their problems.
So a little bit of everything, and if you just listen, you might recognize that voice from, like you said, a bunch of the videos on our resource desk. Tyler's been a huge part of getting that resource desk built out and up and rolling and full of just awesome information. So thank you for that, Tyler. Awesome. I'm so stoked to have you here today. We are going to learn about how to change a bike tire. And so on an electric bike, for the most part, it's the same as doing it on a non-electric bike. There will be a couple of odds and ends depending on the model of bike you have that may be different. So to start with, we're just going to go over some of the tools that we're going to need for this. So first of all, I'll hand them to you, Tyler. You tell me what they are and what they're for.
These are the tire levers. You need these to get your tire off of the rim. If you don't have these, you can use your hands, but it's not going to be fun.
Sounds like you're going to have a bad time.
Here we've got a tire pressure gauge. Easy to see how much air is in your tire. Very important when you're reinflating it to make sure that tire is inflated to the right spec for your riding. Otherwise, you're just going to have to change your tire again.
And we do have a chart on the Resource Center help desk that says, what tire size and recommended PSIs, pounds per square inch pressure, that your tire should be inflated to. So if you have questions about what PSI you should inflate your tire to, definitely go check that out. I'll have Alex post that link in the description a little later. This is also pretty important.
Yeah, it's an inner tube. You need that for the inside of your tire. It's what actually keeps it inflated and holds the air within it.
So in the case of Biktrix, none of our tires are tubeless or tubeless ready. Tubeless tires do exist out in the world, but we are going to be concentrating on the type that we carry, which is ones that are more standard and have that tube setup.
Here we've got a 2mm Allen key, or 2.5mm. I just like to use these to get the air out of the tires. They're easy to just poke in the valve and deflate your tire.
Excellent. So those are the items we'll need for this specific tire in front of us. Now, depending on the type of axle you have, you may need an Allen key to undo your axle. And so you'll know that from having set it up in the first place. So looking at this tire in front of me, Tyler, I'll take those tools back from you. First, we want to take this one off this bike. Now this is a 27.5 by 3 inch, like kind of mountainy all-terrain type tire. How am I getting this off?
So this one has a through axle that actually has a skewer just like your front quick release.
Handy.
Yep, really easy. And there's a little cutout you want the toggle to go into, just like so. And then you loosen it, just like this. Yes, so Shannon's doing an important part, holding up the tire, making sure it doesn't completely fall out of the dropouts. And there's just a few threads on the end of it, and then once those are undone, you'll be able to pull out the axle.
Now, the way these ones are set up is the axle comes through and actually threads right into the derailleur system in the frame and the derailleur hanger on the other side. So you don't have to worry about like another nut or anything on this side, right?
No, you don't have to worry about anything on that side on these through axle bikes. If your bike has a QR, there's a nut on the other side, that you have to worry about.
Before you take that axle out, just to rewind a bit, make sure you shift down to the smallest cogs to be able to get the derailleur out of the way and your chain out of the way to make it a little easier to get this out of the dropouts. All right. So the axle is out. There we go. It's just caught on the teeth. There you go.
Yep.
Perfect. And so that is how you get that rear tire out on a mid-drive. So just like you would any other bike. Before we start taking anything apart, it's always important, you know, for safety, to make sure your electricity is not on. So in this case, make sure your battery is removed, like your bike's turned off. Take out your battery just for safety while you're tinkering around with the back end of your bike or any part of your bike. So we just took the back wheel off of a mid-drive motor, which is pretty much the same as taking it off a non-electric bike. Now, a hub drive motor is a little different story. There's a little more to it than just take out the axle and move the chain out of the way. So we have a Swift light up here to show. This will be a similar setup for like your Stunner LT, your Moto, your Skycap, your Hub Duo, those type, anything with a hub motor. So Tyler, how is this different? What do we need to keep in mind?
So, big difference on these. You've got your motor power wire, which actually runs into the motor and controller. So the first step you should be doing in these cases is unplugging this. There might be some zip ties holding everything taut too, especially on the motor side. You just have to snip those zip ties because once you remove all that, you don't want this wire getting stuck. And then there's a little cap that will be on each axle nut. You just have to pull those away. Pretty simple on both sides. And there are some spacers in between this axle nut and the frame itself. Make sure you note how all those spacers are oriented before you start taking off the wheel, because if those aren't aligned just right when you reinstall, you're not going to have fun. From there, you may also want to remove the derailleur just to get less things in the way, which usually there's just a screw there. It's easy to do. And once you have those steps done, just need to take an adjustable wrench or something and loosen them.
All right, and there'll be one like that on both sides.
Yep.
So just make sure you're getting them both, and then you can slide. It'll just slide out of the dropouts at that point?
Yep.
Cool. So tire's off. This one's still inflated, but let's pretend it's gone flat, and we're going to need to take this off the rim. This process will be the same for basically any of our tires, right,
Yep.
Tyler?
Same for any of our tires.
Okay, so how do we get this off of that?
Well, our first step, we need to make sure there's no air in it. Ideally, if you're replacing this, there will be no air, but if you're just replacing it for fun or for whatever reason, take the cap off your valve. If you have a Schrader valve, this is really easy. Just grab whatever, and poke it in, let that air out. I'd want it to be as flat as possible, that it makes it the easiest to get the wheel off. If you can still hear air, just keep on going.
And you can hear, I don't know if you can hear it on the camera, but I can hear the bead coming away from the edge of the rim as well, which is helpful.
And I have felt the bead coming away from the rim here.
And get a thumb under there.
Okay, this should be empty enough. If it isn't empty enough, then we can retry. And then you have your tire levers. You use these to lift the tire away from the rim.
Now, is there a specific spot you should start? I noticed you started over by the valve.
I like starting by the valve. You can probably start anywhere. And you just want to loosen it. Get that edge of the tire around the rim, just like so.
It's like reverse Tupperware.
It really is. It really is, Shannon. And then,
now, do we need to do it on the other side as well?
yeah.
And just keep in mind keep an eye on your rotors. Make sure you're not bending them or touching them, like we covered in our brake video last time.
all the way around again.
Okay.
Now,
I'll hold the rim, you detire it.
yep. Evidently, we didn't let out enough air, as I see. I'll just hold the stem here if you want to let out some more air. That should be fine.
Now, do we want the tube to come with it or the tube to stay?
We want the tube to stay.
All right, I'll hold that tube down. There we go.
There.
Well, half and half.
Yeah.
All right, so now we'll
Put that tire out of the way. Now we've got our tube with the wheel.
and I'm just going to gently push up on the valve and then grab there because you don't want to just yank it. It is a rubber tube. All right, so now I have the tire, please.
Yes.
We have all 3 bits of our tire, which can be used to make lovely fashion statements. Now, when we're looking at a tire, there's a few different things to consider. So if you are taking these apart to put a new type of tire on, so you're going to want to consider your tread for your riding style. This is a nice kind of all-terrain situation. You can get smooth tires that are great for street riding and things like that. You just need to make sure that whatever tire you choose works with the rim you have. So like this is a 27.5 by 3-inch rim. Could I put a 4-inch fat tire on this one?
It depends. The most important thing is the diameter of the rim.
The width here.
The width, yes, not diameter.
Yeah.
Once you measure the rim width, we do have a guide online that I've compiled that will tell you for your tire diameter and your rim width, what range of tires you can put on this. Usually with a 27.5 by 3, you can get a 27 by 2.8 tire on, but you can't usually go for a 4-inch tire on this sort of rim.
Correct. And then I've noticed too on like the 26 by 4s, which is another common tire size we carry, or 24 by 4 or 20 by 4, also common for us. It's really dependent on the width, whether or not you can get like a 4.8 inch or something less than 4 inches on there. So definitely check out that chart if that is something you are considering doing or what you're working towards with this whole wheel disassembly situation. Now, also on the tire, earlier I mentioned I could hear the bead come apart, I could hear the bead loosening. This right here is the bead. It's that little lip of tire. You can see where it gets shiny and black, and then it's a stiff piece there that connects and hooks into the rim under here and makes sure that your tire is seated properly there, so you're not getting blowouts or bits of tube popping out the sides. On your tube, if your tube is coming apart because like you're taking your tire apart because you've got a flat, then there's a few different things to consider, particularly if it's like a slow leak or you're not sure what's causing it. I have a dead tube here. If you're getting a slow leak and it's just maybe a tiny puncture, you're going to want to inspect your tube and your tire. So you can go around and listen and see if you hear any like air fizzing out, see if you can locate that hole. You may need to just like get a little mop bucket or something with water and then put some air in your tire and then dip it in the water. You'll see bubbles as you rotate through. You'll see bubbles wherever the puncture is. So that's for if it's a little pierced bead. If that's the case, then go back and inspect your tire. Check if it was like a little thorn or a nail or something, and if it's still stuck in the tire itself. There's a few common punctures that you may see in a flat tire. Some are fixable, some are not. By fixable, I mean patchable, which is pretty much enough to get you home so you can replace your tube. So first off, you're going to see something like snake bites, and it's generally 2 little holes that go like that. There's one, there's the other, and they kind of go like this. That's usually caused by running into something that's like too sharp of a corner. So maybe too sharp of a sidewalk ledge, or like a rock that's kind of on an angle and you like hit it going too hard, like, and that's what'll cause snake bites. The other ones that are common is going to be like the puncture, like I said, which is generally just a little poke hole, and blowouts. They're often along the side of the tube, kind of where the bead and rim would meet, or in this case, didn't quite meet, and it went exploded. So they're usually kind of chunky like this. That one, depending on the severity, you probably won't be able to patch that very well to limp home. You might just be kind of walking. So speaking of patching, I always recommend carrying a patch kit with you. This is the one that I carry in my bike. I just got it from a local bike shop. There's a few different kinds you can get. Mine comes with tire levers, a little bit of sandpaper, and mine's a peel and stick one. Some have like a little glue bottle and then a piece of rubber. So to do a patch, which we could do on these snake bites here, you're gonna wanna kind of just like wipe off the area, get it kind of tidied up and cleaned up. You got a bit of sandpaper, you're just gonna rough her up a little so everything will stick. And then in this case, it'll be a peel one off, stick it on, make sure it's well done, and then reinstall, reinflate. If it's the glue kind, you're gonna put your glue, you're gonna stick it on, kind of hold some pressure, let it set, which could take a few minutes.
Yeah, usually these kits will have instructions, so you can familiarize yourself with whatever it tells you to do.
And then reinflate and get yourself home or to a local shop for the next bits. All right, so this one is pooched. I'm not gonna just throw this away. I mean, you could probably find somewhere to recycle it, but I actually find having a spent tire tube around kind of handy. I've used little chunks of the rubber on various parts of my bike, like if your handlebar mount is getting slippy or like your display mount is getting slippy after some use, just cut a slip off and put it between the mechanism and tighten it back up. It grips nicely. You can also cut it up and make fantastic jewelry if you're into that kind of thing. So let's pretend this one was patched. This is the good one we just took off.
Yep.
How do we put it back together, Tyler?
So first we have to get the tube back on the wheel. Now on your wheel, there will be a hole. You need to make sure that lines up with whatever your valve is. You can just slide it right in.
There you go.
And then we can get that tube just back on the wheel. This is still has a little more air. Actually, no.
We're good?
Yeah, sometimes you want a little bit of air in that. It'll help the wheel actually get seated on there.
And I think you also want a little bit of air in there when you're reinstalling it so you can avoid pinch flats.
Yeah, you're
I didn't show that on the cut wheel, but that's basically going to be like a straight line cut because your tube got caught in between like your rim and the bead and separated it. All right, so how do we get the outside back on the inside?
So you've got to deal with both sides here. So I like to deal with the side that's going onto the bottom first. So let's do that. You just kind of have to brute force it in a way. We can get a little bit over and just get it started. And then continue along. Just make sure that you get the tube in between that wall of the tire. So it's kind of inside. We aren't worrying about the bead quite yet.
You just need things to be in roughly the right place to set us up for success here.
Yep. And right now this is kind of just all over the place. Sometimes once you just kind of have to get things in line, it will work a little nicer. Sometimes I just like to be chaotic while I'm doing this though. work our way around.
There. Okay, so we've got the inside on the inside, the middle in the middle, and the tire on the outside. I'm not quite ready to roll just yet.
No,
now
no,
what do we do?
Not quite yet. So now we've got to get the bead of the tire in between the rim and the tube.
So the fun part, to reseat it.
Yes. And this, you'll have to do both sides. Doesn't really matter
time?
which, just one after the other. And we'll just work your way around from one point. If you have a second person, it can be a little easier. This first side can be a little nicer sometimes. You can usually do a lot of it by hand. You might need to use tire levers though. So now we've got our first side. Sweet.
And most of our second side, actually.
Yeah.
Nice.
Sometimes with these thinner 27.5 by 3 tires, this works a lot easier. On something like a fat tire, like a 24 or 26 by 4 or a 26 by 4.8. It's a little trickier.
All right, so now we've got everything lined up. How do we make this work? I think it's time for some air.
It is time for some air. You are correct. So we've got our air pump here.
Now, on this tire, it does mention the PSI on the sidewall of the tire. A lot of them do, so if you don't have that handy dandy chart on hand, you can refer to your tire.
So we gotta just thread our pump onto here. Just like so. Make sure all your air is getting into that tube and not outside. And this is a good point. Double check your bead. Make sure your tire's all set up properly before you start inflating. At this point, if you have a pinch in your tube, it could very well explode on you, and that is not fun for the ears, especially if your head's right by it.
Yeah, so make sure your bead is inside the rim, make sure your tube is inside the tire, not between the bead and the rim, and just keep an eye on it as you're filling.
Yep. And now the fun part, let's fill.
So I can feel it filling up. It's definitely more solid.
Yeah, so our pump does have an air pressure gauge, but if yours doesn't, you should have a gauge handy, and you can just check while you're filling it. You don't want to overfill, otherwise, like I said, you may have a popped tube, and that's not fun after you've already replaced it.
And it's easy to get like an impact puncture from an overfilled tube. So if you're riding on your bike with your tires too full and you hit like a sharp ledge, that's a really easy way to get some snake bites, really.
Yep. So this one just has 2 ends for a Presta valve or a Schrader valve. I'll just put it in the right end. This one's telling me we're just under 20 PSI, so we'll put a little bit more air in it.
And while we're doing that, I'm also just going to, run my thumb finger around the bead just to make sure everything is still seated. I don't feel any bulges at the bead where the tire and the rim meet, and this one is good. To put it back on, you're just going to basically reverse the steps of taking it off. So just like reinstalling, make sure you've lined up your brake calipers and things like that when you go to put this back on the bike. Now, a couple times here we've mentioned things like Schrader, Presta, different valves. Yep. So what's this one?
This here is a Schrader valve. This is the most common valve that you're gonna see on bike tire, car tire, pretty much any tire, really.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's got the little pin in there to release the air. It's got its little hat to keep everything together. Just put that guy back together, but we also have other valve types.
Yeah,
like
occasionally you might see on a bike tire a Presta valve. It's a lot longer, does have a little bit of a nut on it as well. So this one, you take the cap off once again, and then there's a second cap. You need to release that to inflate, deflate. Then once you're done with all that, you twist the little cap back on and put the plastic cap back on as well.
And this little one, that's to go up against the rim, correct?
Yep.
Keep it nice and stable.
Yes. And sometimes you'll need a different adapter to inflate your tires that have Presta valves. Usually, if you're ordering a bike from us, it's going to have a Schrader valve. But if you do have a Presta valve, you might need to look into an adapter for your air pump.
Excellent. All right. Now we've reinflated, we're going to reinstall. We know how to deal with the hub drive motor, taking that on and off. Is there anything else we should consider when we're thinking about replacing tires, tire safety, tubes, anything like that? We do get asked a lot about products like tire liners, slime, stuff like that. That's not stuff we carry generally, but that is some stuff you can get aftermarket. What would be the purpose of those items?
Those will help keep your tube inflated, keep your tires from puncturing. Say if you're running over something sharp, a big tree branch, it'll keep your tire from puncturing, keep your tube from puncturing, and just keep you out on the road longer without having to go through this pain of replacing a tube or a tire.
Yeah, I know some of our folks down in Arizona really like those tire liners because they have a thing called goat's heads down there, which is a type of cacti that have really gnarly spikes on them that can puncture things quite easily. So that might be something to consider if you're in terrain like that. Now, if I want to ride in the winter, is there something I should consider tire-wise or tube-wise if I'm riding in, say, a Saskatchewan winter where it gets down to minus 35 Celsius?
Well, for that, you can definitely get a tire with a little bit of a thicker tread pattern, or maybe even a studded tire. If you can go a little wider, even better. Also, in the cold, you want to be running a little lower of a tire pressure. That way, when you're going over that terrain, the tire will conform a little bit more to it. Those treads can dig in and give you the traction you need to get going.
I think that pretty much covers the soup to nuts of putting a tire on and off a bike and then back on again. Thanks so much for joining me today, Tyler. This has been awesome. Like usual, if you have any questions pertinent to this topic, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I will be live here in just a moment to answer those with you. All right, so thanks again, Tyler, and I will catch you guys in a few minutes. Hey, thanks past me and past Tyler for that information and examples on changing tires. And welcome to everybody who's been watching along. Thanks for joining us today. So I have Tyler once again with me to go over some things, answer some questions. If you have any, please pop those in the chat. Just to start, Dwayne, I see your question about the FS Pro here. We just came out with that model. It's nearly sold out in its first run, so I don't yet know if there's going to be any changes coming on it in the next run. Probably nothing big because we did just come out with the Pro recently. If anything, probably be some minor stuff, but I can't speak to specifics at this time for it. But thank you so much for that question. So if anybody else has any questions about tires, tubes, all that good stuff, please go ahead and pop that in the chat. While we were watching just that video there, Tyler and I were chatting about a few things and just want to go over a couple things we may have missed in our pre-film. So to start with, Tyler, you were saying when it comes time to pump up a tire, I should probably just hook it up to a compressor, turn it on full blast, and just go to town, right?
No. If you do that, there's a very real possibility you put too much air in your tube and
just
kaboom! It explodes. It's loud. It's a pain because you got to replace that tube again, and no one wants to have to go through that more than you have to.
Gonna have a bad time.
Yeah.
So
use a hand pump.
Use a hand pump is what we would recommend when you're inflating your tire. We also didn't mention like rim tape or rim line, like the tire liners, like that's in the rim liners.
No.
And so that is something on some of our bikes. There's red ones, some of them are black ones. You can get all sorts of different colors out there aftermarket. Ours just come with what we have on hand at the time because sometimes it can be tricky to get specific colors. That is there to protect your tube from the metal of your tire, and is something when you are changing flat, you should definitely inspect that. It also covers the inside part of the spokes, the spoke nipple. That's where the spoke mounts from poking your tube, which, I mean, that's not ideal. So make sure you're inspecting that when you're changing your tire as well. Make sure the spokes are in good condition on that side. And if you are looking to change that piece up to have maybe a different color that's showing through the cutouts of your rim, make sure you're paying attention to your rim width, because you'll need to make sure you get the correct one for that. Anything else, Tyler?
The only other thing I can think of, sometimes when you're seating your tire, it's nice to spray some soapy water around, and then when you're inflating, you can tell when it stops bubbling, you've got your bead is set. And I mean, it's fun because you get to kind of look at bubbles while you're pumping it up.
Very nice. All right. Thank you for that feedback, Dennis, about the smaller display. If anybody else has any questions, we've got a couple more minutes here at this live. Go ahead and throw those in the chat. We're just enjoying the sunshine on this lovely Friday afternoon here. Looking at tires. Dennis, pardon our neighbors. Dennis, I saw your comment earlier about your Juggernaut in the winter on the 26x4s. Yeah, that is a really good lifespan on that old pair. And yeah, any other tips for riding in the winter? I know in the video we mentioned lowering your air pressure,
Kind of like driving, it'll take longer to get started, take longer to stop. You might be sliding on the snow a little bit, so just have that extra caution, and you might need to take a few extra minutes just to deal with all the snow.
Yeah, assuming you're somewhere like here where we get all that snow.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to be where there's no snow, well, congratulations.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so I'm not seeing any more questions coming in here on the chat, so we will wrap it up for today. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you, Tyler, for coming along on this ride with me.
Thanks for having me.
And we will see you back here again next Friday. Have a good weekend.